Does a fully loaded smoker produce juicier barbecue than a smoker with just one piece of meat on it? I'm testing it out by fully loading my smoker with 6 briskets and 6 pork butts, and then I'm comparing the humidity and moisture loss data to a cook on the same smoker but with just one brisket. This would be pretty crazy if it was true, right? All you have to do is load up your smoker to get juicier barbecue. I got this idea when I was visiting Austin, Texas last year, and I noticed that a lot of the top barbecue joints were cooking on giant 1,000-gallon smokers with a ton of meat all the way loaded up, and I thought to myself, I wonder if all those briskets in there are losing humidity, giving off moisture, and creating a more moist and humid environment? And if so, is that resulting in juicier barbecue? I mean, if it's true, it could explain why the top barbecue joints have such juicy barbecue. Maybe they have an unfair advantage because they're smoking hundreds of pounds of meat on these giant smokers. In previous experiments, I've found that increasing humidity in my offset smoker results in more juicy barbecue. For example, a water pan has a small effect on moisture retention for a brisket, and injecting water vapor or steam into the cook chamber has a very large effect. Tuffy Stone also says in his book Cool Smoke that he gets juicier barbecue when it's raining out because of the increased humidity, and Myron Mixon built his H2O smokers on this exact same premise. His smokers have a giant integrated water pan that's heated by the firebox because he knows that higher humidity equals juicier barbecue. So to test this theory out, I loaded up my smoker with 8 pork butts on the right side and 8 briskets on the left side of the smoker, and I had a dry and wet bulb thermometer right where the heat exits the stack. That is what is going to let me measure the humidity in the cook chamber. I smoked everything until it hit at least 190 degrees, and then I removed it from the smoker and wrapped it in foil with beef tallow and clarified butter. Then I put all 16 hunks of meat in my Winston CVAP holding oven for 16 hours. But before we get to the results of this experiment, I'd like to thank Chef's Temp for sponsoring this video. It's been over a year now since I started using the Chef's Temp Final Touch X10, and it's proven itself to be super reliable, durable, and accurate for my everyday barbecuing needs. In addition to its ultra-fast and accurate temperature readings, it also has a fully rotatable probe design and a backlit display so I can see exactly what the temperature is reading even if it's pitch black outside, which a lot of the time it is when I'm smoking a brisket late into the evening. It has a magnet on the back so I can stick it to the smoker or fridge when I'm not using it, and it has a really cool hold feature that allows me to reach way back in the smoker. I can then take a temperature read of the meat in the back of the smoker, hit the hold button, pull it out, and then I can clearly see what the temperature is. An IP67 waterproof rating means I can easily wash it off by submerging it in soapy water, which is important to me because my thermometers are pretty much always covered in grease and sauce at the end of the day, so I need to soak them in water. I highly recommend the Chef's Temp Final Touch X10, and I've used it long enough to confidently recommend it to you as a leading instant read option that's priced very low for the value it provides. So if you need an excellent instant read thermometer, click the link in the description section below and use code STBBQ15 to get 15% off your purchase. Again, that's code STBBQ15 for 15% off anything in the Chef's Temp store, including the Final Touch X10. All right, let's get back to the video. So back to the experiment. The next day, I weighed all of the meat and calculated the moisture loss, and then I threw all of the meat in the garbage. I'm just kidding. I actually did a catering event that day and served it up to 200 plus people, so I used the meat. And then on another day, I smoked a single brisket in the same smoker, again with the dry and wet bulb thermometer set up and logging data through my ThermoWorks signals. Like the other briskets, I took that single brisket up to 190, then I wrapped it and I held it for 18 hours until the next day when I weighed the moisture loss. And here's what I found when I compiled the data from all of the experiments. In both tests, I had an average dry bulb temperature of 280 degrees. That means on average, the ambient temperature in the smoker was 280, pretty straightforward. But with the fully loaded smoker, we saw an average wet bulb temp of 154, while the single brisket test only had an average wet bulb temp of 136, much lower. That means the single brisket test environment was much drier than the fully loaded test, which was much more humid. Specifically, it means that the meat in the fully loaded smoker did not start to lose a significant amount of moisture due to evaporative cooling until it hit an internal temperature of 154 degrees Fahrenheit, which is quite high. Whereas in the single brisket test, that single brisket only had to hit 136 degrees until it started losing a lot of moisture due to evaporative cooling. Basically, a good way of thinking about it is the wet bulb temperature in your smoker at any given time is the temperature at which the brisket stalls. It's the temperature at which evaporative cooling cooling really starts kicking in, your brisket stalls, starts losing a lot of moisture until it loses enough surface moisture that it can start increasing in temperature again. But by that time, it's dried out quite a bit, and it's dried out even more if your wet bulb temperature is lower because it started that evaporative cooling process at a much lower temperature. So based on these results, I would expect the single brisket test brisket to have lost more moisture than the fully loaded briskets just based off the wet bulb thermometer data, and that's exactly what happened. Fully loaded meat retained 60.66% of its initial weight, while the single brisket retained only 58.38% of its weight, which is a difference of 4%, which seems very small, but when I did the calculations based on an average sized brisket, that works out to about half a cup of water that all of those briskets and pork butts had in the fully loaded smoker that the single brisket test did not have. That's this much water. Cheers. So does fully loading your smoker with meat make your barbecue juicier? Based on this experiment, I would say yes, it does. So if you have the option to always cook as much meat as possible in your smoker, it's gonna result in juicier barbecue. Thanks for watching, guys. I will see you in the next video. Happy smoking.